You were never abandoned the way you were made to believe. Your love story did not collapse because the feelings disappeared. Someone stood between you, controlled what each of you believed, and quietly turned love into distance. But that person has finally broken their silence. And the confession they just made changes everything about your separation. Listen carefully. Because the truth coming forward now is not small, and once your person hears the entire confession, they may never look at the past the same way again. For a long time, your person carried one painful belief inside their heart, that you were the one who stopped fighting. They believed you became distant first. They believed there came a moment when you simply decided the relationship was no longer worth saving. And every time they wanted to reach out, every time their heart pushed them toward you, someone close to them was there whispering the same poisonous message: don't go back. They already chose life without you. Your person trusted those words because they came from someone they never imagined would betray them. That was the beginning of everything. This third person didn't destroy your connection in one dramatic moment. They did it slowly, carefully, one conversation at a time, one missing message at a time, one twisted detail after another. When you were hurting, they told your person you were angry. When you were waiting, they told them you had moved on. When your person wanted to contact you, they convinced them that reaching out would only humiliate them. And the cruelest part? They knew both of you still cared. They saw it. They knew your person still checked for your name. They knew there were nights when your person couldn't sleep because memories of you kept returning. They knew there were questions that never received answers. But instead of helping two people understand each other, this third person used every misunderstanding to create a larger distance. Your person was told things you never said. You were blamed for decisions you never made. Moments that could have brought reconciliation were deliberately interrupted. And over time, the silence became so heavy that both of you began believing there was no way back. But recently, something changed. The person who helped create this separation started carrying a kind of guilt they could no longer hide. At first, it appeared in small ways. They became uncomfortable whenever your name was mentioned. They stopped defending the story they had repeated for years. Whenever your person spoke about the past, they would suddenly change the subject or leave the room. Your person noticed it, but they didn't understand why. Until one conversation finally pushed everything over the edge. Your person asked a simple question. Was I ever told the whole truth about what happened between us? The room went silent. The third person could have lied again. They could have continued protecting themselves. Instead, they lowered their eyes. And after years of silence, they admitted something your person was never prepared to hear. They admitted that you had tried. You had not simply disappeared. You had not stopped caring overnight. There were attempts to communicate that your person never fully knew about. There were words from you that were never delivered the way they should have been. There were conversations that were intentionally twisted because this third person believed separating the two of you was somehow for the best. Your person froze. Because suddenly, years of heartbreak started rearranging themselves inside their mind. They remembered the moments when something didn't feel right. They remembered wondering why your actions never matched what they were being told about you. They remembered feeling that somewhere underneath all the anger and silence, there had to be another explanation. And now there was. But the confession didn't end there. The third person admitted that jealousy, fear, family pressure, and their own personal judgment influenced what they did. They convinced themselves that they understood your relationship better than either of you did. They decided who your person should trust, who they should build a future with, and which connection needed to disappear. They interfered because they believed they had the right to control an ending that was never theirs to write. Your person became furious. Not ordinary anger. The kind of anger that comes when someone realizes years of emotional pain may have been built on a lie. They asked, "Do you understand what you took from us?" The third person couldn't answer. Because there was no answer big enough. How do you return lost years? How do you repair nights spent crying over something that never should have happened? How do you explain all the choices your person made afterward because they believed you had rejected them? Your person walked away from that conversation shaking. But something powerful happened after the anger. They started remembering you differently. Not through the story someone else created. Not through the accusations. Not through the manipulated memories. They started remembering your patience. Your loyalty. The conversations nobody else knew about. The promises made privately. The way you understood parts of them other people never reached. And suddenly, the question inside their heart was no longer, "Why did you leave me?" It became, "What if they never truly left?" That question has changed everything. Because your person is now looking back at your separation with completely different eyes. They are questioning conversations, questioning timelines, questioning the people they trusted, and most importantly, questioning whether the future they accepted was built on a version of the past that was never true. But there is one final part of the confession that your person has not heard yet. Because just when everyone thought the worst had already been admitted, the third person revealed that they were not acting completely alone. Someone else knew what was happening. Someone else helped keep the truth buried. And that person may be much closer to your person than anyone ever imagined. The third person looked directly at them and said, "There is something else you deserve to know. I wasn't the only one who wanted the two of you apart." And when your person heard who else was involved, everything inside that room changed. Your person stood there completely still. For a few seconds, they couldn't even respond. Because hearing that one person had interfered with your connection was painful enough. But discovering that someone else had been involved turned that pain into something much darker. They looked at the person confessing and asked, "Who else knew?" There was hesitation. Not because the answer was forgotten. Because saying the name out loud would destroy another relationship your person had trusted for years. The third person finally admitted that someone extremely close to your person had known there were still feelings between you. They knew communication had been blocked. They knew certain things being said about you were exaggerated or completely false. And yet, They stayed silent. Worse, there were moments when they actively helped keep you apart. Your person's face changed instantly. Suddenly, this was no longer only about one jealous person making bad decisions. This had become a coordinated effort. Different people had different reasons, but they shared one goal: to make your person believe that returning to you would be the biggest mistake of their life. One person used fear. Another used guilt. Someone else repeatedly reminded your person of family expectations. And any time your person defended you, they were made to feel foolish for still loving someone they were being told had already forgotten them. But now the truth was exposing something completely different. You had not forgotten. And neither had they. That realization hit your person harder than anything else. Because they started thinking about every major decision they made after the separation. Every time they forced themselves to move forward. Every time they ignored the desire to contact you. Every relationship they considered because they believed there was nothing left between the two of you. They began wondering how different life might have been if just one person had told the truth. The third person continued speaking. They admitted there was one particular night when your person nearly discovered everything. You had apparently tried to reach them during a moment when emotions between you were still incredibly strong. Your person never saw the full message. They were told only that you had contacted them to close the chapter. But that wasn't what your message said. Your person immediately demanded, then what did it say? The third person became emotional. Because this was the part they had feared admitting more than anything else. Your message had not been goodbye. It had been an attempt to save what was left. You had wanted one honest conversation. No family. No outside opinions. No third person standing between you. Just the two of you finally speaking openly about everything that had happened. Your person's eyes filled with tears. Because they remembered that exact period. They remembered waiting. They remembered feeling strangely restless, as though something unfinished was pulling at them. They remembered almost reaching out to you themselves. But someone convinced them not to. They were told you had already made your decision. They were told contacting you would only reopen a wound you wanted closed. So your person stayed silent. And you probably interpreted that silence as rejection. Two people were waiting for each other while someone else was convincing both sides that there was nothing left to wait for. That realization shattered something inside your person. They turned away and covered their face. For years, they blamed themselves for not being enough. Then they blamed you for walking away. Now they were discovering that perhaps neither of those stories had ever been true. The truth was much uglier. Your separation had been fed by interference, secrecy, and people who believed they had the right to decide your future. Your person finally asked the question they had been terrified to ask. Why? Why would anyone go this far? Why manipulate two people who genuinely cared about each other? Why hide messages? Why create misunderstandings? Why make both of you suffer? The third person answered quietly. Because they were afraid. Afraid of what would happen if you and your person became serious again. Afraid your person would stop listening to the family. Afraid old secrets might eventually surface. That last sentence changed the entire conversation. Your person immediately looked back. Old secrets? The third person realized they had said too much. But there was no way to pull the words back. For the first time, your person understood that breaking the two of you apart may not have been the real objective. Your relationship might have been getting dangerously close to exposing something much bigger. Something connected to the family. Something that certain people had spent years protecting. And suddenly, your person remembered something you once told them. You had said that certain reactions from their family never made sense. People became defensive around you without reason. Certain questions were avoided. Certain conversations stopped the moment you entered the room. At the time, your person thought you were overthinking it. Now they weren't so sure. The confession had opened a door nobody expected. And once your person started asking questions, the third person became visibly nervous. They begged your person not to involve anyone else yet. That only created more suspicion. Your person said, if my separation was used to protect another secret, then I deserve to know what that secret is. The third person started crying. Then they said something that made your person's entire body go cold. They said your name had been discussed in a private family conversation long before the separation happened. A decision about you had already been made before either of you knew there was a problem. Your person stepped closer. What decision? The third person could barely look at them. Because the answer was worse than betrayal. It meant your separation may have been planned long before the arguments, the silence, or the final goodbye. And then came the sentence your person will never forget. They didn't wait for your relationship to fail. They decided it had to end. But before your person could demand another explanation, the third person revealed that proof of that secret meeting still exists. And someone has been hiding it all these years. Your person could barely process what they had just heard. Proof still existed. Not a memory. Not another accusation. Not somebody's version of what happened. Actual proof. And suddenly, every excuse that had protected the people behind your separation began to collapse. Your person demanded to know where it was. The third person hesitated again, then admitted that the evidence had been kept hidden because it contained details nobody ever expected your person to discover. There were names. There were dates. There were private conversations. And most painfully, there was evidence showing that your name had been discussed as if you were a problem that needed to be removed. Your person felt sick hearing that. Because you were never given a fair chance. People had judged your place in their life without understanding what existed between the two of you. They had created their own story about you, then used that story to justify everything they did next. But your person was done accepting stories. They wanted the truth. They asked, "Where is the proof now?" The third person finally admitted that one piece of it had been placed inside an old envelope and kept with someone your person trusted deeply. That answer caused another shock. Because the person holding that envelope had spent years pretending they knew absolutely nothing. They had watched your person suffer. They had watched them question why everything between you disappeared so suddenly. They had even comforted your person during some of their darkest moments. All while knowing there was more to the story. Your person immediately wanted to confront them. But the third person grabbed their arm and said, "You need to understand something before you go." The confession still wasn't finished. Apparently, the plan to separate you did not begin because people hated you. It began because someone became terrified of the influence you had on your person. Around you, your person had started becoming stronger. They had begun questioning decisions they once accepted without resistance. They were talking about building a future based on what they wanted instead of what everyone else expected. And certain people noticed. They feared that if your connection became permanent, your person would finally start making their own choices. That meant old family control would disappear. Secrets might be questioned. Promises made behind closed doors might be broken. And one person had far more to lose than anyone else. So they turned your relationship into the enemy. They made your person believe loving you meant betraying their family. They made you look selfish for wanting a future together. And whenever your person showed signs of choosing you, the pressure became stronger. Your person suddenly remembered arguments from the past that now felt completely different. Times when family members became unusually emotional whenever your name appeared. Times when small disagreements about you somehow became massive confrontations. Times when your person was told, "You'll understand one day why this cannot happen." At the time, those words sounded like disapproval. Now they sounded like a warning. Your person looked at the third person and asked, "What exactly were they afraid I would find out?" Silence. A long, painful silence. Then came another confession. There had been a private agreement made years earlier involving your person's future. It had nothing to do with love. It had everything to do with loyalty, reputation, and a promise your person never personally made. Someone else had made that promise for them. And when your relationship with you became serious, that agreement was suddenly in danger. That was when the interference began. Your person's heartbreak had not been a random consequence. It had become part of somebody else's plan to keep an old promise alive. Your person's eyes filled with anger. So I lost the person I loved because someone made a decision about my life without me? The third person couldn't deny it. And that silence was the answer. Your person immediately asked whether you knew any of this. The answer was no. You were kept almost completely in the dark. You only saw the changes. The distance. The strange behavior. The cold responses that didn't feel like the person you knew. You may have wondered why someone who once spoke about forever suddenly seemed terrified to fight for the connection. Now the reason was becoming clear. Your person was under pressure you never fully saw. But even that didn't explain everything. Because the third person admitted something else. There was one final conversation about you after the separation. Your person had never been told about it. Someone had asked whether you might come back, whether you might contact your person again. And one person in that room responded with a sentence that proved just how deliberate everything had become. If they come back, make sure the two of them never get 5 minutes alone. Your person went completely silent. That sentence destroyed the last remaining doubt. This had never been simple misunderstanding. Someone had been actively protecting the separation. Even after you were already apart. Even after both of you were hurting. Even after enough damage had already been done. They were still afraid that one honest conversation between you could undo everything. And maybe they were right. Because one honest conversation might have exposed the lies immediately. Your person began crying, but this time the tears were different. There was grief in them. But there was also rage. Rage over stolen choices. Rage over lost time. Rage over every moment they almost listened to their heart but allowed somebody else's voice to become louder. Then your person said something the third person clearly did not expect. I want to see everything. Not tomorrow. Not eventually. Everything. The envelope. The messages. The names. The agreement. Every piece of evidence connected to your separation. The third person warned them that once they saw it, they might lose respect for people they had loved their entire life. Your person answered, I already lost years. I'm not losing the truth too. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because your person was no longer trying to protect the people who had protected the lie. They were trying to recover the part of their life that had been taken from them. But just before they left to find that hidden envelope, the third person gave one final warning. There was something inside it your person was not prepared to see. Something written shortly before your separation. Something involving you directly. And according to the confession, when your person finally reads those words, they will discover that somebody knew exactly how deeply you loved them. And used that love against both of you. The envelope was finally brought out. For years, it had remained hidden where nobody thought your person would ever find it. The edges were worn. The paper inside had aged. But the words were still there. And the moment your person saw your name written across the first page, their hands started trembling. Because this wasn't something written after the separation. It had been written before everything fell apart. Before the cold silence. Before the arguments. Before your person started believing you had stopped caring. Someone had been preparing for the end while both of you were still trying to save the relationship. Your person opened the first page. At first, it looked like nothing more than notes from a private family discussion. Then they saw a sentence that made them stop breathing for a second. It said that your connection had become too serious to ignore. Too serious. Those words hit differently now. Because the people around your person had known exactly what was happening between the two of you. They knew this wasn't temporary. They knew you weren't simply passing through their life. They knew your person was beginning to imagine a real future with you. And apparently, that terrified somebody. Your person kept reading. The notes described how their behavior had changed around you. How they had become more independent. How they were starting to push back against certain family expectations. How they had begun talking about decisions nobody else wanted them to make. But then came the line that broke something inside them. Distance must be created before they make a permanent choice. Your person read it twice. Then a third time. Distance must be created. Not give them space. Not let things happen naturally. Created. Somebody had intentionally decided that distance between you was necessary. Your person looked up at the third person who had confessed. Who wrote this? No answer. Your person asked again. This time louder. Who wrote this? The third person finally said the name. And the shock on your person's face was immediate. Because it was someone they had defended for years. Someone whose advice they had trusted. Someone who had repeatedly claimed they only wanted your person to be happy. Your person couldn't believe it. They started walking around the room trying to understand how someone so close could have quietly participated in destroying something that meant so much to them. But the envelope contained more. The next pages were worse. There were details about how certain conversations should be handled. If your person asked about you, they were supposed to be reminded of every painful moment. If your person defended you, someone was supposed to bring up family loyalty. If you tried reaching out, the message was supposed to be treated as another attempt to cause confusion. And there was one instruction that made your person's stomach turn. Do not allow direct communication until emotions settle. Your person stared at those words. Because now they understood why every attempt to repair things had somehow failed. People had worked to keep you from speaking directly. Because direct communication was dangerous to the lie. If the two of you had sat together without interference, you might have compared stories. You might have realized messages were missing. You might have discovered that both of you had been told completely different versions of the same events. And the entire plan could have collapsed. Your person whispered, they were afraid we would talk. The third person nodded. That confirmation hurt more than another confession. Because it meant your love had not been weak. It had been powerful enough that people believed it had to be controlled. Your person kept reading. Then they found something written in handwriting they recognized immediately. Not typed. Not copied. Handwritten. It was a short note. Only a few lines. But those few lines changed the entire emotional weight of the room. The note said that your person was still emotionally attached to you and needed to be convinced that you had already chosen a different future. Your person dropped the paper, because that was the exact lie they had been told. They had spent years believing you moved on first. They had forced themselves to accept that you had made your choice. And now there it was in writing. Someone had decided that this was the story your person needed to believe. Not because it was true. Because it would make them stop fighting for you. Your person's eyes filled with tears. Did they ever know how badly this destroyed me? The third person answered quietly. Yes. That one word changed the atmosphere completely. Because until that moment, your person could still tell themselves maybe nobody understood how much pain they were causing. But they knew. They saw the sleepless nights. They saw your person withdrawing. They saw them pretending to be fine. They saw the emptiness after your separation. And still, nobody corrected the lie. Your person sat down. For the first time, anger gave way to heartbreak. They started remembering all the times they almost contacted you. The drafts they never sent. The calls they almost made. The moments they stared at your name and convinced themselves you no longer wanted them. They remembered forcing themselves to walk away from a love their heart had never completely released. And now they knew someone else had helped create that belief. But there was still one paper left inside the envelope. It was folded separately. The third person looked terrified when your person reached for it. Maybe you shouldn't read that one yet. Your person stared back. After everything I've already read, you think I'm stopping now? They unfolded it. And instantly, their expression changed. Because this wasn't another family note. It was something connected directly to you. A copy of a message you had written when the relationship was falling apart. A message your person had never seen. Your words were emotional, but clear. You had not asked to leave. You had not said goodbye. You had written that you knew something was happening behind the scenes. That people were interfering. That you could feel your person pulling away, but you did not believe their heart had truly changed. And then came the sentence your person could barely read through the tears. If you still love me, don't let other people decide how our story ends. Your person covered their mouth. Because those were words they should have received years ago. Words that might have changed everything. Words that proved you were still fighting while they were being told you had already given up, but there was another handwritten note beneath your message. A note written by the person who intercepted it. Only 6 words. 6 words that explained years of pain. Do not let them see this. Your person stared at that sentence for what felt like forever. Then they stood up. The sadness disappeared from their face. What remained was determination. They wanted names. They wanted answers. And this time, nobody was going to convince them to stay silent. But before they could leave, the third person stopped them one last time. Because there was still one confession they had been too afraid to make. They looked directly at your person and said, "There's something you need to know before you go looking for them." The person who ordered your message to be hidden recently asked about you again. Your person froze. Why? The third person swallowed hard. Because they're afraid you're about to find out what really happened the night your separation became final. Your person's entire expression changed. The night our separation became final? Those words hit harder than everything they had already discovered. Because your person remembered that night. They remembered how suddenly everything seemed to collapse. They remembered one conversation turning cold without warning. They remembered believing you had finally made the decision to walk away. But now they were being told that something else happened behind the scenes. Something they were never supposed to know. The third person looked terrified. Not guilty anymore. Terrified. Because this was the secret that connected every lie, every hidden message, and every person who had helped keep the two of you apart. Your person moved closer and said, "Tell me exactly what happened that night." The third person took a long breath. Then the truth started coming out. That night, someone had learned you were preparing to reach your person directly. No middleman. No family member. No friend standing between you. You wanted one final honest conversation. You were tired of hearing things through other people. Tired of wondering why the person who once loved you suddenly sounded like a stranger. And you were ready to ask your person directly whether their feelings had truly changed. But somebody found out before you could do it. That was when panic started. Because the people behind your separation understood one dangerous thing. If you and your person spoke honestly that night, the entire story could fall apart. So a decision was made. Your person had to believe you were done. And you had to believe your person had chosen everyone else over you. Two different lies. Delivered at exactly the right moment. Your person's eyes widened. Because suddenly they remembered receiving a message that night. A short message. Cold. Final. The kind of message that made them believe there was nothing left to save. For years, they believed it came from you. The third person lowered their head. It didn't. Your person went silent. The room seemed to disappear around them. What do you mean it didn't? The third person admitted that someone had used words based on things you had previously said, then changed the meaning completely. The message was made to sound believable. It sounded like your pain. It sounded like your frustration. It even included something personal enough to make your person believe nobody else could have written it. And that was why your person never questioned it. They believed you had closed the door. Your person's voice started shaking. So while I was reading that, what was actually happening with them? The third person could barely answer. You were waiting. Waiting for a response that never came. Because while your person believed you had ended everything, You believed they had ignored your final attempt to save it. That realization broke your person. They turned away with tears running down their face. Two people. Both waiting. Both hurting. Both believing the other had made the final choice, and someone else stood between them, making sure neither discovered the truth. Your person whispered, "We didn't leave each other." Nobody answered. Because nobody needed to. The truth was finally obvious. You had been separated by a story neither of you wrote. Your person sat down and started crying harder than they had during the entire confession. Not because they suddenly believed the past could simply be restored, but because they finally understood how much of their pain had been unnecessary. They thought about every birthday that passed without you, every holiday, every lonely night, every time someone new entered their life, and they compared that connection to what they once had with you. Every moment they secretly wondered why they still couldn't completely let you go. Now they knew. Their heart had never received the truth it needed to truly close that chapter. The third person quietly said, "There's more." Your person looked up immediately. More? How could there possibly be more? Then came the part nobody expected. After that fake final message was delivered, someone apparently kept watching for signs that either of you might discover the deception. They checked whether your person tried contacting you. They asked whether you had reached out again. They even warned others that if your name came up, nobody should encourage your person to question the separation. Your person felt betrayed on a level they had never experienced before. This wasn't one mistake. It wasn't one lie told during an emotional moment. It was maintained, protected, repeated, for years. Then your person asked the question that frightened the third person most. Why are they asking about you again now? The answer came quietly, because someone had recently discovered that the hidden message might still exist in its original form. Your original words. Unchanged. Unedited. With a date and time that could prove exactly what happened that night. And whoever finds that original message would immediately know that the version your person received was not the same one you sent. Your person stood up. Where is it? The third person said they weren't completely sure. But someone had saved a copy. Someone who had remained silent all these years. Someone who had recently started feeling guilty after seeing how much damage the separation caused. And that person was preparing to come forward. Your person asked for the name. The third person gave it. And your person's face went pale, because it was the last person they expected. Someone who had stood beside them after the separation. Someone who had listened while they cried about you. Someone who had repeatedly said, maybe it was simply never meant to be. That person had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to know the story your person believed was incomplete. Your person immediately reached for their phone. But the third person stopped them. There's one reason they haven't confessed yet. Your person stared at them. What reason? Because the original message doesn't only expose who manipulated your separation. It also contains something you wrote about your future with them. Something so serious that the people interfering believed it could change your person's decision permanently. Your person's hands began trembling again. What did they write? The third person shook their head. I never saw the entire message. Then they revealed the only line they remembered hearing someone mention. A line that had terrified the people trying to separate you. If you choose me after knowing the whole truth, I'm ready to build the life we promised each other. Your person closed their eyes. Because they remembered that promise. They remembered exactly when it was made. And suddenly, years of buried emotion came rushing back. But before they could say anything, the third person's phone vibrated. One new message appeared. They looked at the screen. Their face instantly lost all color. Your person asked, "What happened?" The third person slowly turned the phone around. The message contained only one sentence. They found the original message. Tell them the truth before I do. And underneath it was the name of the person your person trusted more than almost anyone else. Your person stared at that name, and suddenly every missing piece of the past fell into place. The betrayal had not come from a stranger, but from someone they had trusted with their deepest pain. For years, that person had known the truth and watched both of you suffer in silence. This time, your person refused to accept another excuse, another delay, or another carefully protected lie. They demanded the original message, and when it was finally placed in their hands, everything changed. There were your real words, untouched and impossible to misunderstand. You had never abandoned them, never chosen someone else, and never asked for the love story to end. You had been fighting for one honest conversation while they were being convinced you had already walked away. Tears filled your person's eyes as they realized how completely the truth had been stolen from both of you. But buried inside that message was something even more powerful than the betrayal itself. You had written that no matter how much pressure came from outside, your love had always been real. You had also written that if they ever discovered the truth, you hoped they would choose with their own heart. Those words broke the final wall your person had built around their feelings. They no longer wanted revenge to control what happened next. They wanted answers, accountability, and most of all, the chance to finally speak to you without interference. The people responsible were confronted, and this time there was nowhere left for them to hide. One confession became two, then three, until the entire story of your separation was finally exposed. Your person learned that the love they had spent years trying to bury had never actually betrayed them. It had been surrounded by fear, manipulation, and decisions made by people who never had the right to decide your future. And for the first time in years, your person stopped asking why you left. Instead, they began asking how they could find you and tell you what they now knew. They picked up their phone with trembling hands, knowing one conversation could never return the lost years. But it could finally return the truth, the apology, and the choice that had been taken away from both of you. Whatever happens after that conversation will belong to you and your person alone, not the family, not the third party, and not the past. Because the confession that was meant to stay buried forever has finally set your love story free.